All right, we've got another question. I believe it's coming to us from Christopher Spear.
Hey, legal team. I'm Chris Spear from Southwest Michigan and eXp Realty. I'm also asking for a friend here. We've been told that you can create an agency relationship with a buyer, even in the absence of a written buyer agency agreement. I thought that the settlement practice changes required a written agreement when you work with a buyer, and that you cannot get paid more than what's stated in that written agreement. Can you explain the differences here? My friend is very confused.
Christopher, that is a very good question and a lot of moving parts in that question. So, the first thing that I think we should address, obviously, is that the settlement obviously does require that written agreement in place. It needn't be an agency agreement, but it does have to specify the amount of compensation, and that is triggered by working with a buyer and touring a property. But what we're talking about here is some of the nuances in Michigan law, which is really important because we hope to not have to worry about this much longer. There's actually legislation making its way through the process in Lansing that would eliminate implied agency. But as it stands, and as of this taping, we still have implied agency in this state. So what that means is that if you act in such a way with your customer slash client where you are indicating to them that you are representing them, and of course, even if their perspective is that you are representing them, that's 99% of the law. So implied agency creates a lot of issues for the brokerage, though, especially if you are in a designated agency office, because as we know, designated agency firms have to be very specific how they observe formalities to make sure that they have written agreements in place on who's designated to represent whom. And of course, if you have implied agency, that blows up the entire model. So obviously the consequence there is a forfeiture of commission, obviously instances of non-consensual dual agency. So making sure that you establish agency as early as possible, obviously making sure that the consumer is clear as to the capacity that you're serving them in. If you want to work with a client as a customer, I should say a consumer as a customer, then you need to make that very clear to them that you have limitations on what you can provide. Obviously, we also emphasize the fact that consumers need to understand time is of the essence. You want to have an agency relationship so you can get true agency services. So all that being said, to sort of sum it up, written agreement is required in order to get paid. That's something we understand through basic contract law, but a written agreement is not required to actually create agency at this point in time in Michigan. As I mentioned, we're trying to fix that through legislative action, but right now, clarity with the consumer is more important than ever, making sure they understand not only your value proposition, but also the services that you can provide.